Talk Radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In Talk Radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Awesome! Awesome! Awesome!
The people at 1170 KFAQ hate me. They know what I think of the word awesome. I'm going to go off on a tangent now because they really hacked me off. The word awesome is a metaphor, actually a word metaphor for our society. If you ask anyone any question about any subject, your answer is always the same because we cannot think. We go, oh yeah, man, it's awesome. Everything is awesome. If a guy is committing brain surgery, say, how did brain surgery go? Awesome, man. Everything is awesome. We cannot think beyond a single word. Do you know, folks, this is unbelievable, that our language is shrinking. The number of words we use to converse is actually shrinking at a remarkable rate. And I forgot what year was the base rate, but I think during Shakespeare's time, compared to today, our vocabulary has been cut by 50%. We use half the number of words, and now it's starting to accelerate with the word awesome. I think we're going to see just the entire annihilation of the American language. That's all we're going to say. We're not going to say hello, how are you? We're going to say awesome. Here we go.
Awesome!
Yeah. And please don't tell me hating people is unchristian or anything like that. You know, I can hate all I want on this program. I received a card from a friend, and it's a very interesting one. They know I'm a talk show host, and it's a picture of a talk show host sitting at a desk, and there's an inscription on top, and it says, "Our top story tonight: everything, everywhere sucks." More after this. You know, we almost feel this way, folks.
Yeah,
and
we do.
what I find to be actually unawesome is the fact that we don't know, we don't even recognize most of the time what really does suck and what does not. I mean that. We don't know. And I want to explain to you why I think this is so. We live in the USA. Now, you think the USA stands for United States of America. Put that in the drawer, lock it. It doesn't mean that. It means United States ad hominem. Ad hominem. I was reading, I read a lot of stuff all during the week. I came across that word, very unusual word to use, twice in my readings this week. Of course, it's Latin derivation. And what that means, it's appealing to feelings or prejudices rather than logic. It's marked or being attacked on an opponent by an opponent's character rather than answering the question or answering to contend with the issue. This is the method of American debate today, folks. What I like to say, this is a prescription for a conversation-dead America. Now, if you think this is unimportant and you want to turn to a station that'll tell you something more important, please do so.
Right now.
Yeah, right now, because this is what is critical. Most of what you hear on talk radio is interesting. You have someone like Mark Levin, who is a constitutional expert. The guy is brilliant, and he will talk specifics. This program's not going that way. And you know that. I mention this every single week. What I want people to realize is how they think. I want them to start questioning themselves. There's a few reasons why we have difficulty doing that. Because we live in an ad hominem society. It is very difficult to deal with the actual truth, actual facts. The reason for that is because once we deal with the facts, it'll violate something that we always believed in. Now, please, I'm not talking about religion. because we believe in a lot of things. Some guys, I have a friend of mine who thinks every Chevy that was ever made was better than any Ford ever made. It's a belief system. And we carry these belief systems around, and it becomes us. It becomes who we are as a person. We identify with that. But once someone violates our belief system, folks, it is not easy to accept because it actually does neurological damage. And I'm not kidding you. This is not a joke. Tests have been done where when someone's belief system is altered, they literally go through a neurological change. It's a physical, a physical change as much as an emotional change. We live in an ad hominem society. How often do you hear debates on television? And if you do listen to debates on television, let me suggest something to you. You are wasting 100% of your time. Because what do they say? Well, you remember what Nixon did, and he did this, and you think of this, and they're like, well, yeah, Jimmy Carter did that, and and Kennedy. It's all God. And then we walk away and we want to know, why am I so confused? Number one, you're confused because you're watching television. Number two, you're confused because you're not listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Let me make it very clear to you.
That's true.
And I mean that. I mean that sincerely. I have thought of giving up this program many times. I hate to admit that because it is a lot of work. For me, it's a lot of work. And it's not a lot of work in that I have to read a lot. I'm reading all the time. I never watch the news. I rarely watch television, except for the drag races at night when I'm just comatose. I do. I love. I love hot cars. I just. I've been a muscle car guy from the 1950s. But I cannot. If I do this because I find it emotionally difficult. And then trying to express myself while I am here, there is a fear that expression, what I am trying to convey, will not come out. And in fact, I told my wife tonight, I said, some days I love to give this up because it's so much work for me. Because I not only broadcast on 1170 KFAQ, but because I broadcast on the internet as well. And I give both equal importance. Now, I'm going to tell you something that I do not expect you to believe because I do not believe it. I get statistics, worldwide statistics, on who is listening to my program on Liberty Talk Radio on the internet. The number two city in the world is Beijing, China.
Are you serious?
I'm absolutely serious.
Really?
When I first saw it, I said, all right, they made a mistake. They blew it, They
Beijing,
meant Camden,
China?
New Jersey, something like that. Right.
Wow.
And so next week, every week, I'm getting, it is 1, 2, or 3. Now, to give you an idea of how important this is, my wife said that she says, if you give up this station, she told me this tonight, an hour before this program started. She said, if you give up this program, she said, you will be doing a disservice to your community. You need to go on. Now, that puts the heat on me, but she's right. Because I don't. Now, if I heard every other talk show host speaking as I do, and the subject matter that I carry on for this program, I would say, hey, redundant, don't need to do that. I'll become a stand-up comic. But they're not doing it. This program is not about House Bill 1524. Don't care about 1524. I don't care what it says. I don't care if 1524 just dissolves the Constitution. It makes no difference. Because everything our government does, absolutely everything, is in the direction of violating the very precepts of the Constitution, which we should uphold dearly. And when I say the Constitution, not because it's a piece of paper, it's because it is based on natural law, on the fact that you, in fact, are a free person. You are born a free person. And if you read the Constitution, you'll realize after a while that it never mentions the United States. It never mentions America. It's a worldwide document. All it is documenting natural law. And every politician who gets into office violates it with rare exception. And those who attempt to change the system are shunted and don't last more than 2 years. So they're not all bad people. But those that stay, for the most part, well over 90%, are violating the Constitution and your natural rights. I had a conversation with an elderly gentleman. He was 91 years old at the coffee shop. And he was just angry about everything. He says, oh, things are going to heck in a handbasket and whatever. And he's an elder man. And he said, I don't know what to do about it. He said, I vote and this is what I get. I said, that's your problem. He says, what's that? I said, you vote. He says, well, I have to vote. I said, who'd you vote for? He says, well, sometimes I feel like I vote for the lesser of two evils. I said, well, if you vote for evil, what do you expect to get out of it? Now, see, we have a belief system that we have to vote. That's not true. You have been told that. You've been indoctrinated to believe that. That's not written in the Constitution says you have to vote. In fact, if in fact you wanted to truly protest, you would never vote again, unless there's a bond issue, a local bond issue.
But isn't that our civic duty?
Oh, yeah, sure, it's your civic duty.
Yeah.
It's your civic duty to stand up for your rights, the rights of you, your family, and your community. Once you vote for the lesser of two evils, you are voting for the system. Anyone who claims, I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat, I don't care how pure they think they are, or what segment of the Republican Party, the Democrat Party, or whatever party, they are part of the problem. If you can categorize yourself as a Republican or Democrat, you are part of the problem. This is why we have to start thinking. We have this ad hominem society, and then we have a normalcy bias above that. Now, normalcy bias means that it's not going to happen because it's never happened before, at least not to me. People who lived in New Orleans when Katrina came to shore stayed in their homes because they never experienced a storm that breached the levees that had protecting them for decades. So it was never going to happen. And those people died. We are a dying society because we have a normalcy bias. No, it won't happen to us. In Germany during Hitler's reign, the Jews, while they were being cattle carred to the Auschwitz and Dachau, in the cattle cars would say to their children and mean it. They would say, don't worry, everything will be all right. If I was hustled into a cattle car, I would say to myself, I think there's something wrong.
Most definitely.
But there's this normalcy bias, and we have acquired a normalcy bias in an ad hominem society, and that's going to be our downfall. Our inability to articulate what we mean and what we should say and what we should do. It is not enough for a talk show host to say, we have to stand firm. I have no idea. I'm standing firm all I want. But my wife asked me to throw out the garbage. I have to move. That makes no sense whatsoever. I hate when they say that. I absolutely hate it when they do that. You want to know the truth, folks? Let me be honest with you. You can't handle the truth.
Oh, my gosh.
You remember that one in A Few Good Men.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
You don't want the truth because deep down in places you don't talk about it.
Those words will go down in history. I mean, you think Gone with the Wind stayed with flood? Those words will. But let's come back on this subject right after this commercial.
Less than 3% of you people read books. Less than 15% of you read newspapers. Because the only truth you know is what you get over this tube. So if you want the truth, go to yourselves. Because that's the only place you're ever going to find any real truth. You're beginning to believe the illusions we're spinning here. You do whatever the tube tells you. You dress like the tube. You eat like the tube. You raise your children like the tube. You even think like the tube. This is mass madness, you maniac.
Peter Finch and Network couldn't be more right. We are a TV tube society. Folks, we are live tonight. I want you to call. This is a live program tonight, Saturday evening, 855-866-1170. 855-866-1170. You can call if you totally disagree with me, partially disagree, whatever you want. If you have any questions, please call. Or if you want to add to this program, 855-866-1170. Let me hear from you. Of course, your email always welcome to comments@libertytalkradio.com. You know, there are a few questions that I have for you this evening. Who do you think, for example, was our best president in the last 100 years or so?
Last 100?
Last 100 years. About round, I'm not, forget the months and whatever.
Carter.
Right? Yeah.
Jimmy Carter. Yeah.
No, really. You know what? I've asked this question. No one has ever got this correctly. Who was the absolutely best president, upheld the Constitution, and presided over the strongest economy America has ever known?
Harry Truman. No?
No. No one gets this right. No one.
No?
No one gets it. In fact, there's a book written recently that I really need to read because I'm so impressed with him. You won't believe it. It would be Calvin Coolidge.
Really?
Yeah. What's really fascinating about Calvin Coolidge is that he was a very, very quiet president, spoke very, very little, however, believed in the free enterprise system. He believed very strongly the only way that you can have a strong country is for people to be sort of in the middle class moving up. And the only way you can do that is to have a laissez-faire economy with no government regulations. He reduced the size of government significantly, literally vetoed everything that came to his desk, reduced the size of government, the cost of government, and the country was the strong, and we were on the gold standard. Absolutely a phenomenal president. But you know what? He gets very little press. Very little press. He gets no press in today's history books because he's basically a free enterprise president. He believed in the freedom of the individual to succeed. And we cannot do that today. If we believe that today, it would turn everything we are doing upside down. And the government cannot afford to do that. All right? So, you know, Calvin Coolidge, he was our 30th president back 1923 to 1929. He was first the vice president under Harding, and then I think it was Harding. Harding? And then Harding died, and then he took over. Yeah, it was Harding.
I would have never guessed that.
Yeah. Here, question number 2. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Who is America's enemy? Who is America's enemy? Think about it. I want you to now.
Yeah,
this is, folks. This is where you start thinking, and you have to go for the aspirin.
Federal Reserve.
Yeah. Who is the real enemy? All right, you have people say, well, China, people say Russia, North Korea, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, they go on and on and on. Yeah, here's the answer, folks, and you can write this down. We are the enemy of the government. You have to understand that concept. The only reason why the government exists is because we allow them to exist. They grow because we allow them to grow. They subjugate us because we allow them to subjugate us. We are the enemy of the state. We have always been the enemy of the state, and it's been like that for well over 4,000 years. This ain't nothing new, Charlie. Ain't nothing new. And don't kid yourself. So if you're a Republican and you're a Democrat, you are an enemy of the people. By mere association. Oh, I can hear now, oh, this guy's a real whack job. You know, he's really out there at the edge, you know. Well, you try. Someone please call. We have someone who's going to call here and maybe tell me otherwise, okay? James, you're on the air. Thank you for calling 1170 KFAQ. What's on your mind tonight?
Can I talk to you about gold for a second?
Sure can. It's your show. Go for it.
Okay, I keep an eye on gold and silver, and I was reading on my iPhone the other day, and it posted 50 countries that has the most gold in metric tons. And I noticed the United States was on the top at 8,300 and some odd metric tons of gold, and it went on down the list. And Greece was on there, and I'm wondering if all these countries are in debt and in trouble, how come they don't use that gold to get themselves out of trouble? Are they holding on to it for a reason? Do they know the economy is going to collapse and they're just kind of holding on to it, or what's going on?
James, you asked an excellent question. One that would probably consume about a 4-hour program. But let me give you the real short version. Although the United States purportedly, by the way, has the most gold in tons, relative to its reserves, it has one of the world's lowest portions of gold. I think only 10% of its reserves in gold. However, if you find most other Italy, for example, I think it's like 73% of its reserves are in gold. Spain proportionally has something like 90% of its reserves in gold. Actually, Cyprus has, I just don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's well over 50% of its reserves in gold. Our reserves in gold is very small. China, for example, that is buying tons and tons of gold every single month, only has about 2 to 3% of its reserves in gold. So the amount of tonnage, first of all, cannot dictate how strong or how much their economy is backed up by the precious metal. Right? It's depending on, of course, if you're a real small country, let's say you have a small country with 1,000 people and you have 1 ton of gold, you're on the gold standard. I mean, basically. All right. So that's number one. So did that sort of answer your question?
Yeah. Are they just basically waiting for the economy to collapse? Is that why they're sitting on it?
No. They're sitting on it because they could only use the gold in order to alleviate the debt burden of their country. But if they sell their gold, they're not going to sell it on the open market so the gold market will collapse. They're going to sell it to another country, to another reserve, and it'll just be basically a paper transfer, and then they'll ship the gold off. So it should not really affect us. Now we're getting hit very hard with the price of gold. There's a lot of negative sentiment out there, and I'm sorry, I just don't have time to go through it. But understand, I suspect that in the next few days we're going to see a change in that sentiment, even if Cyprus sells some of its gold in order to alleviate its debt burden.
Okay.
Did I help you at all, James? I'm sorry I rambled on.
Yeah, I know it's a complicated subject. I'm just curious. I mean, gold's down to 1,500 now, so, it's complicated. I guess we'll just have to sit back and see what happens.
Okay. Hey, thanks a lot for calling Liberty Talk Radio. Hey, for asking such an astute question, please send me an email to comments@libertytalkradio.com, and I'll ensure that they send you a Liberty Talk Radio T-shirt. Don't forget to give me a mailing address and your T-shirt size. Fair enough?
Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you for calling. Right. We have this thing with gold and all this other. But if you want to know what is really going on, what is really going on, please don't listen to television. If you watch the TV, don't do it. I mean, TV, do they talk about economic indicators? How often do you hear them on I don't care what station you live, even on the economic channels, the CNBC News or the Bloomberg, how often do they talk about primary economic indicators, leading, coincident, lagging indicators, the positive short-term interest? You never hear anything. That's the stuff that you have to read and you have to absorb and you have to try to understand the best that you can. All right? I don't want to get into that. We're getting way off the mark. All right, here's another question. I was talking about the enemy of the state. We are the enemy of the state. Now, how does the government exist while having the people being the enemy of the state? Real easy. All you got to do is convince everyone via TV that there are people all over the world that want to kill us because they hate our freedom. There is danger out there lurking, and if it wasn't for a strong central government protecting us, with all of this homeland security, oh boy, we would be in duck soup. But in fact, that's all fabricated. It's all fabricated to keep us from acting on our instincts, saying, these guys are the enemy, to saying, boy, North Korea is our enemy. Could you imagine that? North Korea, a small country smaller than the size of one of our states, that is actually people are starving to death. They maybe have a rocket that may work, and they're our enemy. And then I have another question, and we're going to try to answer that after our break. But why is North Korea our enemy? And how did Korea become a North and South Korea when Korea was, in fact, our ally during World War II? Why don't you think about that for a second? You want to take a break? Let's take a break. Don't go away. Referring to our previous caller, just think, if a country has gold and it's heavily in debt, as most, by the way, Western European America is in, and yet countries such as Russia and countries in Africa and some in South America are very lightly indebted. In other words, they stand a better chance in a currency situation than we do because we're so heavily indebted. In fact, just the other day, we passed the $16.8 trillion national debt mark. In the next 3 months, we will be in the $17 trillion. And that's only current. If you include all the unfunded debt, stuff that we owe, but it's not this year's debt, it's next year's debt, less income that is projected against that debt, we are talking over $225 trillion. Everyone who's done the calculation, all the big financial houses, they've come to the conclusion we can't pay it. There's going to be some catastrophic changes. Referring back to our other caller, once you have the gold and you use your gold to pay off your debts, if you don't change the method of your economy, if you don't go from a socialist state, which most are, to a free enterprise state, which is the only thing that will get you out, what's going to happen? You're going to build up your debt again, but this time you're not going to have any gold. Now, if you sell your gold, you're going to have to take something in return, some fiat paper, to pay off your debts. That's what's going to happen. But you're in worse shape afterwards because you haven't solved the problem. Folks, this drop in gold is an omen for us. We don't know how it's going to play out. If it plays out ugly, the Depression of the 1930s will seem to be a walk in the park. There are noted economists who can envision, they don't predict, but they can envision that a total collapse today because of worldwide fiat currency system can actually drive us back to the dark ages. And the reason for that is because there's no medium of exchange. What are you going to take? You can take. There's no paper. No, but they're not going to take paper anymore. People have never been encouraged to make certain that they have wealth, and a good portion of that wealth should be in some sort of precious metal exchange. We've been almost chastised for doing that. You're a fool if you do that. It's a worthless relic. And you know what, folks? We believe them. And we've believed them all the way through line. All the way, decade after decade after decade. We have an economy that's based on sales, on people buying things. In what economic book would you find an economy would be based on what people buy? People use a credit card. They use debt to buy unnecessary stuff for the most part, made in a foreign country, go further into debt, have no reserves, can't bail themselves out, and then we say, geez, that's good for the economy. Now, either I am missing something really, really big, or we're in really big, big trouble. I suspect this time I'm probably right. Not right all the time. This time I'm right. I'd like to hear your take on it. If you have any questions, 855-866-1170. And if you disagree, please, I'm not going to bite your head off. 855-866-1170. Of course, your comments are always welcome to comments@libertytalkradio.com. Let me hear from you. Now, we live in the height of hypocrisy, don't we? You know, we say we're the wealthiest nation on earth. You know, we say, oh, it's America the free. I love that. This is a free country. Let me read you something. And this, I'm not reading it, this is from memory. Give me your tired, give me your poor. Give me your huddled masses yearning to be breathe free. That's the inscription on the Statue of Liberty. Think to yourself now, does that represent what America is? Give me your tired, give me your poor, give me your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. That has no semblance to this country anymore. Maybe if we say, we will select people who we want and will monitor them for the rest of their lives. That would seem more like America. How could we say we're America, land of the free? It's only a saying. It's something that we learn in school, we memorize, just like every other country indoctrinates their children. It's the height of hypocrisy. It's the downfall of this country. So you say, Joe, what are you going to do about it? What do I do? Well, as I always say, you become your own Federal Reserve. You become worth something. You protect yourself and your family. Don't go out and buy guns. Let me give you an example. I have an old car. I mean, and let me tell you, I can afford to buy any car I want. I just don't do it. I just like my old Subaru. I bought it as a Subaru. They said, hey, it's time. Its car's dead. I mean, it needs too many things done. And so I looked at the cars. I get, oh, they have this nice Forester, you know, they have all this, the Outback. And I said, you know, if I buy this car, I'm buying into the system. I'm going to drive my old car home. You know what I just did? I did something for myself. And I detached myself from the system. I didn't buy a car. When TSA took over the airlines, I made a commitment I would not fly. I fly about once a year now when my wife says, we're going there and you're coming with me. There is no discussion. And that happens once a year. And I go. I'm an obedient husband, love my wife, I go. But when I used to fly maybe 2, 3, or 4 times a year, now it's 1. I beat the system. You can beat the system by your own habits. And folks, let me hear what you think you could do to beat the system. 855-866-1170. That's 855-866-1170. We're live. This is Saturday night, and we're live. How do you say that, you know? It's Saturday night, and we're live. You know? If you look at every single country that is an enemy of the state,
or what they say
is an enemy of the state, who are they? They're every country that refused to use the U.S. dollar as their reserve currency in trade. When Saddam Hussein did it, bingo! All of a sudden, we put him in power. By the way, then he became a bad guy. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad in Iran, right? He said, "Yep, we're not using U.S. currency." All of a sudden, he had to leave. What happened to Libya?
He's gone.
What was his name?
He wanted to do the gold standard.
Was that
Gaddafi.
Yeah, Gaddafi. I'm sorry, I had a brain block. Yeah, Gaddafi. Yeah, Gaddafi. I had my whole crew here looking at me like saying, "Dummy, it's Gaddafi." Anyway, but Gaddafi, you see, he developed the African dinar. It was called Africom, and he wanted to have a confederation of states in Africa, so they can help each other build a continent and be a better place, have the trade and whatever. But it was going to be based on the gold standard. Had to go. His gold standard had to go. And guess what?
He's out of there.
And guess closer to home.
Oh, yeah.
Closer to home, Jack Kennedy. He signed a executive order dissolving the Federal Reserve, and he got hit right in the head with a 6.5 millimeter Carcano rifle shot. Isn't that peculiar? It should be no surprise. Anyone who screws with the Federal Reserve will know it. And this is the world we live in. So if you want to play their game, buy into the system. All right, we have a call. We have time for what caller? We have time for a call. Okay, we have a call. Here we go. Caller, you're on the air. Lloyd, take it away.
Yeah, Joe, I'm glad to hear you live on a Saturday.
Thank you.
Hear you last Sunday.
Well, you know what happened is that I'm a morning person, and they finally broke my arm, and they said you're going to go Saturday night, and so here I am. And I hope I can hold up, because I'm up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I go like heck, and at this time at night I'm usually like watching the drag racing on TV. You know, what's on your mind tonight, Lloyd? Thank you for calling in.
Well, I wanted to respond first to your first question there about which was the greatest president, and I agree Calvin Coolidge was a great one, but I always had this love in my heart for David Rice Atchison. He was president for one day. But
I never heard the name. It's amazing. That's great.
Oh, well, he was from Missouri. He served as president one day between Polk and Taylor, because Taylor was very religious and didn't want to be inaugurated on a Sunday, I believe is the way the story goes. So he just filled in and sat there for one day. and so he's one of the greatest. And then, of course, I also liked William Harrison. He was a great president because he got sick on Inauguration Day and was unable to really do anything until he died. So those would also be candidates for some of our greatest presidents. The remainder of them seem to always do something pretty bad.
Yeah, that's yeah. Well, that's interesting. You know, Lloyd. That's really interesting. I'm so glad that you called. Is any of the more current presidents? Do you have? What's your comment about all the other presidents? Then, how would you classify them?
Well. The current ones you're talking about?
The last 100 years, okay?
Last 100 years? Well, there's not really been too many that were really any good that I can see. I mean, I voted for Reagan both times. I was younger then, and I thought so, but I realized later he was controlled by other people a little more powerful than him.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah.
And so, although he spoke great things, and a lot of presidents do speak great things, but their actions and stuff later.
Right. The actions speak louder than words. Lloyd, we have to go on a break soon, so I want to thank you for calling in. If you send me an email to comments@libertytalkradio.com with a mailing address and a T-shirt size, I'd be more than happy to send you a Liberty Talk Radio T-shirt for that history lesson of yours, okay?
All righty, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Okay, let's take a break. Welcome back to the University of Logic, better known as Cristiano's Conservatory, correcting convoluted conversation, and that's all we seem to have these days. Folks, you need to really get all the fuzz out. I want you to think rationally, think logically. Think as if you were born on the planet Zorg, where you would be chastised, in fact, taken off the planet and dumped on the planet Earth if you were even suspected of thinking illogically or speaking uncritically. That is the only way you'll survive.
Or using an ad hominem argument.
Yes, and using an ad hominem argument. Folks, you know, if we watch enough TV, we will soon believe that the government, if they say this, if they claim to heal death, if the government said that they can heal death, the American public would believe it. This is how numb our society has become. I am concerned because when I speak to people who I know for a fact that are better educated than I am, I mean, they're better read than and then I hear what they say, it makes no sense. I actually had this one person, this was a few years ago, said, oh, the reason why the situation in 9/11 was because they hate our freedom. Now, this guy was a big financial guy. I mean, intelligent. I mean, just highly educated. And I didn't say anything. I said, I couldn't believe he said something so stupid. Now, I want to give you some logic to chew on. Do you realize that the government employees, on average, make twice as much in pay and benefits as private sector people do. I want you to think about that. People who work for the government work for the state. I prefer to say work for the state. Make twice as much, when composite with benefits and all, than the private sector on average. Now, this is why this should upset you. If you think through it, you have a person who is barely making it. They are being taxed. And by the way, and that person is at least producing something in the private sector. Money is being taken out of their paycheck to pay someone who works for the state, who makes twice as much money as they do, who produces nothing. Think about that. You are working, hardly making ends meet, and most people in this position right today, we have less disposable income today than we did 10 years ago. Remember in the old days when we said, well, the next generation always did better than the previous generation? This is the first generation that has gone downhill. But yet this generation is now paying more and more of its money, or more and more of the money that they earn producing something, giving it to someone who is not producing anything, but being paid twice as much. There should be a revolution. We should all be in the streets when you hear that. But I want you to think about it. So when someone says, oh, I could get it, but I got a job with the state, I got a job with the government doing this, this, and that, we shouldn't say, oh, Lucy, that's wonderful. I'm so happy for you. We shouldn't say that. We should say, oh, my God, my taxes are going to go up. Either my taxes are going to go up, or we're going to be further in debt, and I'm going to be paying for that either through inflation or a devalued dollar, or a devalued dollar. Just think. But we don't think that way. We go, oh, it's so nice, as if this money comes from somewhere. Now, the ultimate form of hypocrisy is when the government creates an enemy. Now, Syria, by the way, we're supplying the rebels in Syria. Think of the logic on that. Syria is an ally, a long-term ally of Russia. Now, they don't border each other, but I'm telling you, that area is so small, you and I can walk from Syria to Russia and not have a footache. That's how close they are. Syria is the only country where, well, Syria borders the Mediterranean. That's where Russia has its Mediterranean fleet. I mean, these two countries are aligned with each other in more ways than one. And what are we doing? We are somehow supplying the rebels in Syria. They're 7,000 miles away. What are we doing there? And who initiated all of this uproar in Syria? You think it just happened? It didn't happen in the cities. It happened on the borders, which tells you it's outside influence. Now, what if, folks, what if in Mexico or Canada, one of the countries that border the United States, a foreign country came in and started an insurgency in that country, let's say Mexico, to topple the government and then install a government that was going to align itself with that foreign government, let's say Russia. What do you think we would do? We would go nuts. I mean, it would literally start World War III. And by the way, we would be justified in saying, get the heck out of Mexico and leave us alone. And everyone would agree, but there wouldn't be anyone, and even Russia would say, I don't blame you. In this hypothetical example, by the way. But here's what happened. We take the men, the boys, the men and women of the taxpayers of America who probably have a difficult time finding a job. They go into the armed forces, promise to learn electronics or whatever. They ship them overseas to some ungodly country to fight a war that we have no business being in, and you pay for it. Now, people say, well, Joe, don't you support our troops? Yes, I support our troops, but I do not support the reason why our troops are there. That's another play on words. You see, we are led to believe because we have these sayings that we have to repeat to ourselves over and over and over again. Oh, support our troops. And God forbid anyone would say, I don't support our troops. But it's the wrong question. It's not whether or not you support your troops. It's that, do you support the policies of the government that resulted in the troops dying over there for? And the disingenuousness of our president to talk about Sandy Hook and the poor 20 children that were killed there. Now, don't get me wrong. It's a tragedy beyond my imagination. I can't imagine how bad it was. If it was my kids, I couldn't handle it. But yet, he sends our men and women to die overseas, and we have a lot of collateral damage. We must kill well over 20 children a day or a week. And yet, not a word. Not a word. And then he says, folks, remember, support your troops. Does that make sense to you? When we start getting angry from all of this, when we start thinking and start getting angry, we can take America back. Before that time comes, there is absolutely no hope, not a shred of hope, that this country could ever have a chance of returning to what it was meant to be. It was a country that accepted its poor, its tired, and its huddled masses yearning to be free. Then we can say that, and they can say, that's America. It's the land of the free, the home of the brave. It's the bastion of freedom for the world. The only way we're going to get there is that if we change our minds, and we change the way we think. Folks, this is the end of tonight's broadcast. Thank you very much for listening in, and we'll be rebroadcasting this tomorrow night, and we'll be live again tomorrow morning, tomorrow morning, 6 o'clock, and we'll be returning next Saturday evening. Thank you for listening to Liberty Talk Radio.
You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.